Okay, now I think we're about ready. There'll be some more people coming in. We're actually used to being in a different room, and I overlooked the flags. I apologize for that, but I think we're on our way now. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and for Janice to come tonight. We do start things with a prayer and a pledge here, and so Alan Kais has offered to give our opening prayer. Alan?
Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we do thank you for this wonderful country that you've given to us, and the opportunity to choose our leaders and just have say so about how our country goes. We thank you, Lord, for this meeting tonight and the other ones that we've had that Doug and Cindy have put together with great effort, and we thank them for that too. And we thank you, Lord, for just being with us tonight. We invite you to be with us and to guide and direct the things that are said and done, and get some good answers for the questions that many of us have in this campaign. We give you thanks, and we love you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Okay, would everybody please rise and for the Pledge of Allegiance with me? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's been an exciting or an interesting several months that Santa Prado has been doing these things. I do need to say, like I said, because excuses, but anyway, I'm not used to being over here, especially with all this fancy equipment and stuff, and Western Springs Church actually is over here a lot of the time, and this is their equipment, and they have offered to let us use it, and I'd like to give them a thank you for letting us do this. I really do appreciate that. A couple of things before we get things turned over to Janice is, as a lot of you may know, we have what we call a Liberty Dinner the first Thursday of every month. And tomorrow's the first Thursday. So tonight's your last night to sign up if you want to come. We're actually having our guest speaker is Dorothy Moon. She's a very dynamic representative currently, but she's running for Secretary of State. And personally, I like her very well as a person, and like I say, she's a very dynamic person. So if you want to come to dinner tomorrow night, tonight's your last chance to sign up. There's a board up there. We'd really appreciate you coming. The cost is $35 a seat, but it's well worth it. So, and another thing is you see as we come through the door there's some handouts and stuff by an organization, and Carolyn Harrison's up there. It's called Idaho Parents for Educational Choice. And the sole purpose of that really is try to come up with a bill or a series of bills that, in my summation, is the dollars for education, in a sense, follows the student. Okay, and that's the key thing about that. And that by being able to do that, you're able to hold schools accountable for what they do. You get the parents' choice of what they want to do, and more control over the education of their children. So if you're interested in, actually Carolyn has arranged for a bus to take a bunch of people to Boise on the 28th of January, I believe it is, and a luxury bus, and it's going to be sort of a good time. Go to the Capitol and say, hey, we need something to do this. So I think it'll be a fun time. If you'd like to participate and be on the bus and sign the petition, she has that up there. So I'd appreciate you being able to do that. Okay, and I want to give Janice McGeachin as much time as she can. And I thank Janice for coming. This is a town hall. This is actually the first opportunity that she's had to be able to come and talk to this group of ours, that I call it. Now, even though she is a local gal, and I say this to everybody, you know, she's candidate for our governor. And our governor has a huge impact on what happens in our state, obviously, right? Some of us may be happy or may not be happy with what's going on, okay? Ask the hard questions. And I say this to all the time, ask the hard questions. Don't be PC about it. Don't try to beat around the bush. Your future, your kids' future, your grandkids' future all depend on the people that we elect to represent us and do things in our capital, okay? And so with that, I'd like to invite Janice, and everybody give her a big hand. And like I say, ask her the hard questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Doug. I want a special thank you to Doug and Cindy Toomer I'll hold it, for organizing these opportunities, not just for us as candidates, but for you, the citizens, to learn more about what's happening in our state and have the chance to ask those hard questions, and I look forward to that. I am Janice Kais McGeachin. My father, Alan Kais, the one who offered the prayer tonight. And I want to just start out by sharing with all of you a little bit about who I am as a person, because I know there's a lot of new people that have moved into our community. I was born into a family of five children. I am the second oldest. I am so fortunate that my parents, mom and dad, brought me up in a Christian home. And when I was 12 years old, I accepted Christ into my heart as my personal Savior, and I was baptized then. And those teachings from my parents have been with me my whole life and have helped sustain me through all of the challenges as for each of us experience in life. It's our faith that when we turn to God and we truly rely on Him for wisdom, guidance, and confidence, that's what allows us to deal with the things that come our way in life. And so thank you so much, Mom and Dad, for raising us up that way. We moved to Idaho Falls when I think I was about 12 years old. My father got a job out at the Idaho National Laboratory, nuclear mechanical engineer, and we grew up on Carmel Drive. My parents still live in that house on Carmel Drive. I went to school at Eagle Rock Junior High. It was the first year the junior high opened up. My dad fondly refers to that as Birdstone Junior High. And then I also went to high school at Skyline High School and graduated from Skyline High School. I did go back to Arizona, where we moved from, to attend college, and I was fortunate to get my degree at the University of Arizona in finance and accounting. Now, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had to work my way through college. I'm glad for the support that my parents gave to me, but if you can imagine trying to put 5 kids through college, it's not an easy task. And so I did work my way through college. I don't take any of that for granted, but it was always a really good experience to teach me a good work ethic and how to not take anything for granted. So I graduated from college, came back to Idaho Falls, where my husband Jimmy and I, we are actually high school sweethearts, and I was only 16 years old when I started dating my husband, Jimmy, and he was 20. He was a college boy. I don't understand, Mom and Dad, how did you let a 16-year-old girl go out with a college boy? They always loved Jimmy, but Jimmy and I, we've been married now for 34 years. We have a happy marriage to each other. We're partners in life, we're best friends, and he is my biggest supporter. He doesn't always love the political process, but he has always supported me in my efforts. We have 2 grown children, Liza and James. They both live in Idaho Falls and help us run our companies. We have multiple businesses here in Idaho Falls and in Boise. And that is what I believe sets me apart from a lot of people who want to get involved in the political process, is being an entrepreneur, knowing how to provide livable wages to almost 100 people in the community, and the responsibility that that entails to make sure that we care for our employees and that they can have a living wage and put food on their family's table. So our children, Liza and James, are helping us run our companies, and we're so fortunate that they both live in Idaho Falls, and it's that ability for them to help us in our companies that has enabled me to be involved in the political process. We teach our kids, just like we teach our employees, we have this philosophy of developing a culture in our business that we want our employees, we want our children to be responsible and to be accountable for themselves. And we develop that culture, which requires discipline and patience, and we sit down with them and we go over and over and over so that they can learn what is expected out of them, and then we allow them to operate according to the culture that we have set in our business. And then when they stumble along the way, and we all do because we're all human beings, then it's important for us to come along and say, now, let's understand what happened here and what we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again, or what we can learn from it. And so I take that philosophy in business and in my family. I have taken that to my role and my position serving in government. So after being involved in our community for years and years and serving on a number of different civic organizations, Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, Red Cross, the United Way, the Idaho Innovation Center, I decided to get involved in the political process, and my first run for office was for county commissioner, because I saw that Bonneville County was growing and we didn't have the current leadership didn't have a plan to accommodate all this growth, kind of similar to what we're experiencing today in Idaho. And as a business person, we are proactive. We recognize what's coming to us, and we try to be proactive to deal effectively with those challenges that come our way. That was my first run for office. I lost that race, but it's the only race out of, 7 races that I have lost. And it was hard, but it's what I needed to do to establish some name recognition within this community and have the people in this community know who I am and a little bit about what I stand for. And so with a servant heart, with redistricting that happened a year or two after that first run, within my legislative district, there was a seat that was created there was no incumbent. And I had this open heart to God, lead me where I should go next. And being a finance person, I was following and tracking what was happening in our state. And under then Governor Kempthorne, the state budgets were growing at unsustainable rates, 13-14% rate of growth, where the private sector wasn't growing anywhere near that. So instead of complaining about things, I decided to throw my name in the hat and run for state representative. And so I served representing this community, District 32, for 10 years as a state representative representing the Republican Party. I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican most of my adult life. I honor and I respect our Constitution, our laws, and the platform of the Idaho Republican Party. And what my job when I served in the capacity as a state representative was to go over to Boise and represent the ideals of our Constitution and my party. I recognize that not everyone here tonight is a member of the Republican Party, and that's fine. That's one of the great things that I see happening across our great state, is that people are coming out of the woodworks, because perhaps we've been a little bit asleep at the wheel for the past few years. But people are beginning to wake up, and this is what I'm seeing all across the state of Idaho. So I applaud all of you who are here tonight, whether or not you're engaged in a political party, because it's really important that you as a citizen, be engaged like you are, and do what you can do to make a difference, because we all are given special gifts and special talents from God above. And when those times come, it is our calling to act on what we are being called to during these days. And if we do not apply those special gifts and talents that God has given to us, then we might have regrets in life. And so I think it's really important that we act, that we recognize that, and we acknowledge that, and then we act on that. So and I want to encourage you that there are just so many ways that you can be involved in things that are happening, and especially on a local level within the community. Some of the biggest improvements recently, a few weeks ago, statewide, we saw about 50% of the local school board trustees were replaced. Those local school board trustees carry a big responsibility. Some of the biggest budgets go to the school districts. Now, the legislature appropriates the money for school funding, and they try to put in little attachments, say you're supposed to pay teachers this much money, you're supposed to use this much money for classroom supplies, and this much money for transportation and curriculum, and on and on and on. But the bottom line is that money comes to the local school districts, and they have the full authority to do what they want with that money. And so I'm not knocking any of the people that step forward or have stepped forward in that capacity, but without a true grasp of the responsibility that you have in spending that money, we're not providing our children and the patrons of the school district with the service that they deserve. So I served in the House for 10 years, but I believe in term limits. I don't believe in career politicians. So after serving 10 years in the Idaho House and serving on the Tax Committee, the Budget Committee, the Health and Welfare Committee, and having a reputation of being a conservative Republican voter, I term limited myself and came back to the private sector. And that's when we opened up our restaurant in downtown Idaho Falls. And it's been 9 years since then. It was 2015 when I was following what was happening nationally, and when our 45th president, Donald J. Trump, announced that he was going to be running for president, his message really resonated with me, and I started becoming intrigued with his message about the forgotten man and the corrupt crony system that we have in our nation, but that we also have right here in Idaho. I was intrigued by his message. I sat and I listened the whole time he spoke, and I said, that's the man that we need to become our next president, because he loves America so much. His message about making America great again was so true about what we needed to do to return our government back to the people. So I got involved in that campaign, and it was after that success of him being elected as president is when I decided to get back involved in the process and get involved and run as the lieutenant governor of Idaho and serve in the executive branch of government. So I ran, thank you, I needed that. You could tell, couldn't you? My voice is so.
You could tell.
Thank you. I ran. It was a very competitive race. There were 5 of us, highly qualified. All of us were highly qualified. The state party chair, there were 2 state senators and a state representative and myself. Very competitive race, but my campaign won because we had the message, the right message, and the right strategy of our campaign. My message was, drain the swamp. Yeah. I had these big billboards all over the state, drain the swamp. And if you can imagine, the swamp rats at the Capitol didn't like that too much. So when I won with that message, and when I won with the best grassroots statewide campaign, I can tell you that my life over there in Boise hasn't always been that rosy. And if you've read anything about me in the newspaper, don't believe it. That's why I'm really glad to be before you tonight, because I would love to be able to dispel some of the outright falsities, fake news, and lies from our mainstream media. I wasn't planning to run for governor. That wasn't my goal in life. But after what we all experienced last year, I could not do it. And I can tell you that running against an incumbent person of my same party is not an easy thing. It's not an easy task. And they have done, the swamp and the special interests and the cronies have done everything they can possibly to make my life challenging and difficult. But like I told my mom, I gotta keep that smile on my face. The reason why I made the decision to get involved and run for governor, to become your next governor, is because I am completely disgusted with what I see happening in our great state. After being almost a lifelong resident of Idaho and seeing where we are today, I am disgusted with where we're at. This governor and this governing body has become so corrupt and so beholden to the special interests. There is a benefit to me having been around for a little while, because I know who all the swamp creatures are. I know where to find them in the cracks and underneath the stairs. I know where they're at. I know who they are. And my promise to you, my pledge, is that they will never have an undue influence on this governor, because I know how to stand strong for principle. Our current governor, I want to just share with you a little bit about him. He has been groomed for this his whole life. This is the way that the political structure works, is that you put your time in and you serve your time and then you just go right straight to the top. When he served in the Senate, the Idaho Senate, he was appointed to the Senate by Governor Kempthorne at the time. When he became the Lieutenant Governor of Idaho, he was appointed to that position by the current governor, Butch Otter. And for 20 years, our current governor served on the board of the biggest swamp organization in Boise for 20 years. Now that is why he will not say no to the swamp and the special interest. And what is driving policy in our state is completely corrupt and evil, whether it's what's happening in our educational system, what's happening in our healthcare system. And I would love for you to ask me questions about some of these things, but what I want to share with you about my experience standing up against the cronies and the swamp. I voted against the swamp when the then Superintendent of Education, Tom Luna, implemented Common Core into our state. I voted against that. I voted against the corrupt crony contract, the Idaho Education Network, which went it was a corrupt, fraudulent award. What happened, the companies went through the right process, the procurement process, and the award was given to the vendor who had the best service, the best price, the best offer. And because of cronies, they came in and removed that vendor and placed it with a special interest. So they filed suit, of course. That business owner ended up being my campaign treasurer when I ran for lieutenant governor. But it went to the Supreme Court and cost the taxpayers, cost all of us over $40 million because that's the decision. Now what happened after that? Did some of these people get punished for breaking the law? There's no other way to say it. Breaking the law. Did they get punished? No. They got displaced into different parts of government. That's what happens when there's a favor to be paid. When you do something for me, I'm going to do something for you. I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about them. And they put them in a different position within government. And it never goes away. And that is what's doing all of us a terrible, terrible disservice to us as honest, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. I also was instrumental in helping to postpone the implementation of Obamacare in our state. With very heavy undue pressure from the special interests, again, especially within the medical community. But we did it in my committee because we studied the law. We didn't do like what Speaker Nancy Pelosi did. She said, let's pass the law so that we can know what's in it. We actually studied the law, and I printed out thick copies of the law for each one of my committee members, and because we studied the law, we were able to prevent it from being put into place in Idaho. And I took the law and I placed it right in front of Governor Otter's face, and I said, how can you support this? Because it says right here, if you do this, if you implement this through the state exchange, this is where the individual mandate will be enforced. So I showed it to him, and we were able to prevent that from being implemented into our state. But it is this ever-growing increase and influence of this corrupt system that is directing the policy in our state. And this is the reason why I made the decision to run to become your next governor. Because, again, I cannot sit back and just watch all this happening. The biggest threat to our state is what's happening in our schools today. After the lawmakers fought over budgets last year on the issue of critical race theory and social justice agenda, social emotional learning, they want these, I could tell you so many stories. There was the president of this big group that back in 2015, he made some of the most corrupt, vile remarks to a sitting senator because he wasn't going to put a bill through that they wanted. He should have been fired for that, but nobody stood up, nobody spoke out about that, and they're still in place. And because nobody has spoken out against this, their power has continued to grow, and it is the power of the evil corruption and power that is directing our state government today. And that's what needs to stop. If we don't stop it now, and I don't mean in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years or 8 years, I mean now. We need to stop it now, because if we don't, we will lose our state. So I am running to become your next governor. I am running on the principles that I will continue to fight to protect your individual freedoms, your liberties. I will fight for our state sovereignty. We've been losing our state sovereignty again because of this money. When I was running for lieutenant governor, our state budget was 36% funded by the federal government. Today, 45%. And why? Because of the greed and the corruption and the undue influence of the special interests, that every time the federal government comes along and says, we would love to give you this grant, that if you would just teach these little kids, little sweet-hearted little kids in pre-K school books about transgenderism and how to be an anti-racist, we will give you that money from the federal government. All you have to do is implement it into your schools. Thank you to the lawmakers, Representative Hanks, for putting up a good fight and killing that. These special interests who are trying now to, Carolyn showed me a book that's on display at Barnes & Noble's here in Idaho Falls today, the 1619 Project. When President Trump was the president in November of 2020, he issued an executive order recognizing, this was after the New York Times put out this report about the 1619 Project. It's false. They're in this writing, this document, they're trying to change the face of America and say that the true birth of America started in the year 1619, because that's the year that the first slave ship came to the shores of America, and that's the birthday of America. Wrong. False, 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 false. Because first of all, there were slave ships that came over here in the 1500s from the Spaniards. Now, slavery is a terrible abomination of humankind, but what these people who want to change the face of America, what they fail to recognize that it's our founding fathers' belief that we are all created by God and we are created equal under God, with the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the birth of America, and it is our Constitution that was drafted thereafter that protects those basic rights, God-given rights, and natural laws as human beings. Slavery has always been a stain on humanity, but the people who want to change the face of America fail to acknowledge what our founders recognized and what they put into our Constitution to abolish slavery once and for all. So back to this, in November of 2020, partly in response to that 1619 Project, and in what we had all started seeing progressively growing over the years. The foundation for this has been laid for decades. It hasn't just happened overnight. But our president, by executive order, issued an executive order that established what he called the president's 1776 Advisory Commission. And he put a group of people together, including the chair of the commission was the president of the Hillsdale College. And they did a great job. They beautifully laid out the principles of our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, even recognized some of the challenges that America has always faced: slavery, fascism, communism, all those things. Laid them all out. But then, recognized them in this report, but then gave a beautiful solution to how do we deal with this. And part of how we deal with it, number one, family. We make sure that we reinstate the role of the family in our schools, number one. Number two, we make sure that we're teaching the right things to our kids, a classical education, and we go back to the basics of reading, writing, math, and put this into place. What's the first thing that Biden does when he gets to be the president? He undid Trump's executive order on this beautiful policy. So I actually was in Boise last night in Garden City, and it was a real special opportunity. I decided as the lieutenant governor, again, because, well, I have been endorsed by President Trump for my campaign to become the governor. And my pledge to Trump was, if we do this, my pledge to you is that I will continue to fight for America First policies in Idaho. And so that's what I did as lieutenant governor. I said, we're going to get people together to sign the pledge. And we had a gathering last night in Garden City, Idaho. 125 people showed up. I had 51 elected officials and citizens sign the pledge. And we're sending all these signed pledges back to President Trump so that he can know how much Idaho is behind him and supports these policies. But that's a start. We're gonna do that. When I was studying this issue with the task force that I put together, I asked our agencies who serve and are appointed by the governor to please come speak to the committee about this proposed Biden rule, which will be giving school districts grant money if they teach the 1619 project in their classrooms. So we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us. Oh, so anyways, none of those agency heads would come talk to the committee. We still have a governor that denies this is a problem in Idaho. His head is buried in the sand. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, working with the legislature to make sure that 1619 project does not get taught in our classroom. So I'll be working, as your next governor, I will be working with my colleagues in the legislature to put a stop to that, put a stop to these teachings. Education is one of the most important things we can do. Right now, our scores in mathematics are average in Idaho. We're not doing our kids any favor by having them be average. So we need to work with our kids, and we need to have this vision of excellency in education so that they can be properly prepared for their life after high school. We're failing in those scores. We're failing in the go-on rates in Idaho. What that means, what a go-on rate means, is that they measure how many people that graduated from high school went on to get a degree of some sort, whether it's a 2-year or a 4-year degree. And we're failing. For more than a decade, we've been failing. We've got this goal of 60% of our students to meet that goal. And for more than a decade, we've been failing. And I did take a suggestion to the State Board of Education as your lieutenant governor. I said, why don't we measure other things like 1 year or less certification in a trade or an apprenticeship program? And you know what they said to me? They said to me, well, we just don't know how to measure that kind of thing, so we'll think about it. Well, so I go, okay, I went back to the trade organization, the association. I said, can you do this for me? Can you put these measurements, these scores on your website so that people can see your progress and what you're doing? And they did it within a month. And so see, we need to turn away from the way that has been typical in the bureaucracy of our government and get people in there, in those positions that do not accept mediocrity. People who want our kids to excel and be successful. Because if we have to spend the first year or two in college remediating them, that's a waste of all of our taxpayers' dollars. And we should be recognizing those skills-based training opportunities. And I am a big proponent of that. I serve as the president of the Career Technical Education Foundation and support giving scholarships to kids for pursuing those. And we need to have more of those trade schools in our schools. because our business community needs them. There's so many jobs that are unfilled because we haven't properly trained our kids. So other areas of improvement, certainly in healthcare, we're going to make healthcare by breaking through the monopoly that I sometimes fondly refer to as the medical mafia. We're going to break through that, and we're going to make sure that there is true choice and competition in medical care for people. Because since Obamacare wasn't fully implemented into Idaho, would you raise your hands if any of your healthcare costs have gone down? I don't see any. As business owners, we've seen 2-3 times increases in our health insurance premiums ever since. So we need to break through that monopoly. Those healthcare facilities that are growing all across the state. If you want to know partly why your property tax burden continues to increase, if you live in a neighborhood or a city or a county that has one of those big fancy healthcare hospital facilities next to you, do you know that those buildings are completely off the tax rolls on the local property tax? They are fully exempt from property tax. And so as they're so-called nonprofits, as those grow and their profits grow and their power grows, so does your property tax grow. Because those budgets on the local level, city, county, and the schools, is what you pay for on your property tax. And when you're removing that much off of the base of the property tax, we are all paying more for that. So we need to work to have true freedom of choice, free competition within healthcare, especially making healthcare more accessible into our rural communities in Idaho. And I was serving in the House at a time when the medical mafia was arresting midwives for delivering babies, a natural process in our rural communities. So I worked with the special interest and the people that were wanting to provide that service to make it so that they could provide their job legally. So we're going to do that. Then we're also going to do a much better job of managing our natural resources here in Idaho. Idaho lands belong to the state of Idaho. They do not belong to the federal government. And when you study it's called the Northwest Ordinance, as the framers of our Constitution knew that our country was growing and wanted to establish a process for new states to enter the nation. The one thing they did is they abolished slavery, said slavery will not be permitted in any of the new states that come into the Union. And then the other thing they did, in the Northwest Ordinance, it's called the Equal Footing Doctrine, meaning that all of the states that were going to be formed in the western states would have the same equal opportunities as the original 13 states. Meaning the land within the boundaries of those states belonged to the states. That was the intent of our framers when they established this process for the new states in our nation. But what happened then, as we know, Congress came along and started designating, well, we want this national forest here and we want that forest there, and then some over here, we're going to have wilderness and we're going to have BLM land, and suddenly so much of the western lands has just come off. In some of our counties, like Custer County, 97% of Custer County is off the rolls. I mean, no wonder Custer County is suffering so much. Same with Lemhi County and some of the counties in the northern part of our states. So we need to have much more control over our lands, keep our lands open for us as citizens of Idaho. It's why we love the state so much. And better utilize our own resources, our God-given resources that we've been blessed with. And by taking advantage of things like the Good Neighbor Authority more. I think we only use that 10% in our state, and we need to do that. I know that we can do a much better job of managing our natural resources and our land. There's thousands and thousands of board feet lumber in our forest that goes to waste every year. And the feds, they don't care. They just want to leave it there and just let it all go up in flames. And then when it all goes up in flames and we have some of the most talented, skilled firefighters in the nation, then what do they want to do? They want to force them to take a jab. And if they don't take a jab, they're going to lose their job. So that's what's happening in Idaho County. Some of our best firefighters, we're losing them because they're not taking the jab. So these are the things that I see happening in our state that we need to put a stop to. These are the reasons why I'm running for governor. I want to be your governor, to be able to get things back into line and out of the hands of the swamp in Boise. And like I said, there is a benefit to having been there and having some experience because I know who they are. And they're not going to have a place. They're not going to be in my administration like they are in the current administration. So with that, I'm going to ask you for your support. I'm going to tell you that with a concerted effort of conservatives, we can win this race. We have internal polling that shows that our current governor, for one, has very low favorability ratings for an incumbent governor right now. Number two, 36% of the voters of Idaho right now are undecided. I already have 25 to 30% built-in name recognition because of who I am, my position, having already run a statewide race and taking a stand on principle over and over and over again against this administration and against the crony corruption. So if we can unite as conservatives, that's how we win this race. We all unite and we coalesce and we win in May. And that's what I'm asking of all of you tonight. I am asking for your support. I ask you to go onto janiceforidaho.com. There's lots of ways that you can get involved in our campaign. We are raising money. In spite of some of the things that you might have heard, we are raising money, more money. It hasn't all been reported yet, but we're getting ready to report it all to the Secretary of State's office. The reason is that I have almost 1,000 small donors that have been contributing to my campaign. Some people giving me $5, some giving me $20. And I can tell you that I know that contribution to my campaign means so much more to me than a special check written, from a special interest, because I know that it's coming from the hard-working Idahoan. And we do have the best statewide organization. We have 9 regional chairs covering every part of the state. We have county chairs in almost every county, 44 of them, almost all the way filled. And we have almost 1,000 statewide volunteers. We have a game plan and we will be successful. My promise to President Trump when he gave me his endorsement, I said, I will not let you down. I will fight like I've never fought before for the people of my state, this state that I love not more than my God and not more than my husband, of course, but it's who I am, this state of Idaho. We can lead the nation and show the nation how to solve the challenges that we're faced, as long as we remain grounded and stay grounded within our Constitution and the principles of freedom and liberty. Those 2 principles are always worth the fight. So thank you so much for standing up for our state and for being willing to step forward and also fight that good fight for freedom and liberty. I ask you for your support, Janice McGeachin. I want to become your governor. So thank you so much for giving me this chance. I do welcome any questions that you have and love to have the opportunity to dispel any fake news that's been circulating around about me. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll actually pick for you. Okay. So we'll just take questions just so to help her a little bit. I'll be picking the hand, so you know if don't get picked on, you can growl at me instead of her. But you know, if I could ask you though, just to repeat the question to make sure that people can hear, that would be great. Okay, you're first.
Okay, so as they say, talk is cheap. I'm not trying to demean you at all. You become governor, and if you were to be able to get the entire federal government out of our primary and secondary education systems, how would you do that, and what would it cost? You said about 47%.
Oh, thank you so much, sir, for that question. The question is, when I become governor, how are we going to get the federal government out of our primary and our secondary school systems? It's going to be a process that takes time. Where we start is we start by saying no more. And why have we gone from 36% to 45% in just 3 years? So the governor sets the tone, because the governor is the first one to present the budgets, the agency budgets, to the legislature. And so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start by saying, no, we're not taking any more of that money. But then through a combination of innovation, creating better competition, and stimulating our economy by lowering taxes, and we do need to lower sales tax, we need to lower income tax, we need to lower unemployment insurance tax on our business community, we need to lower property tax. And we need to do that. We need to continue to remove regulations, and by better utilizing our natural resources, that's how we're going to begin to build out and become more independent and able to sustain ourselves and not be tempted by that carrot that gets dangled in front of us.
Okay. Next. Keith.
Okay, so thanks for being here and taking my question. My name is Keith Newberry. I lost my job on September 20th over COVID protocols. I had 2 religious exemptions denied, one of them without any reason given. Before I ask my question, I'm just trying to do a little fill-in. I want to take a moment to establish why this question is important. The INL has independently established a policy of vaccinations for COVID-19 as a condition of employment. The administration really didn't pass anything. The INL really did it independently. So that's BEA and FLUOR. They have refused many religious exemptions. Last I heard, as many as 500 people have lost their jobs for refusing to get vaccinated. The INL BEA under Lab Director John Wagner, in my opinion, has been engaged in discriminatory, coercive, fraudulent, and threatening behaviors to their employees. And the management team that are under them. In June of this year, and this has been on for months, in June of this year, CDC Bears data showed 650,075 adverse reactions to CE vaccines, 13,911 deaths. In September of this year, 701,559 adverse reactions, 14,925 deaths. In October of this year, 798,634 adverse reactions, 16,766 deaths. In November, on or around the 13th of November, I'm sorry I don't remember the exact day, I didn't get the exact day, a Pocatello man lost his life. He was forced to choose between his job after his exemptions were denied, and his life died. He entered the hospital 2 weeks after getting vaccinated, and due to blood clots in his lungs, and 2 weeks after that, he passed. His wife lost her husband, his children their father, his grandchildren their grandfather. My question is, will you use your position and or influence as Lieutenant Governor of Idaho to start encouraging prosecuting attorneys to start convening grand juries and charging these people that are doing these things. I mean, there's lots of charges that could be had: accessory to murder, racketeering, wrongful death, fraud, discriminatory and hostile workplaces. And there's all kinds of bad stuff going on at the Idaho National Laboratory. It's not just the INL. There's hospitals, nurses, the firefighters you mentioned. And so there are people that are dying as a result of this. These policies that the Idaho National Laboratory has independently said you either get vaccinated or you lose your job.
Keith, that's why I'm disgusted of what's happening in our state, that you and thousands of people have lost their job over this. And your question to me is, what will I do? Will I use my position as Lieutenant Governor? I already have. The last time the governor left the state, I issued an executive order. Now,
it's a more specific question, though.
There's other things that could be looked at, yes. And I actually going to be calling a prosecutor in a county. It's very difficult in this environment to get people to be willing to stand up and speak out against the sitting governor and the attorney general as well. But I do intend to do that. So it's not like these things have not been tried to have been addressed. The House of Representatives, first of all, going back to last year, I over and over and over again, I called on the legislature to come back into session in 2020 to deal with these things today that we're dealing with that nobody then would ever have thought we would be dealing with, right, Representative? And we were calling, I was attending rallies, I was protesting, my weekly newsletter going out of the Lieutenant Governor's office on a regular basis was calling for the legislature to come back and assume their rightful constitutional authority to set policy in our state and to end the state of emergency and the act of tyranny that we're still experiencing under the current administration. So when they finally did come back into session this year, the House of Representatives brought those bills. We need a law that prevents this. And the House brought bills that passed the House, and in some cases in a supermajority vote, veto-proof vote. What happened when they went to the Senate, they got thrown in a drawer and they never saw the light of day. We need a law, and I continue to advocate for the legislative body to come back into session and address this, because, I mean, now the governor says, I've filed this lawsuit against the Biden administration. Well, you know what that is they're filing a lawsuit that the Biden administration has overstepped its jurisdictional authority in labor law and employer relationships. That's a no-brainer. It is so unconstitutional for the federal government to be interfering with businesses in the respective states. So of course they're gonna rule against that, the courts. Is that gonna change anything in Idaho? No. These things were happening before the lawsuit came along, and when they prevail in court, it's not gonna change anything, and that's why we need a law. Some people have criticized, actually that's what the special interests, they say that. They say it's not the proper role of government to interfere in the business, the relationship. Well, we don't have to have another regulation or an impediment on a business, but what we can do, like the state of Florida has done, is we can say it's against the law for a person, no person can lose their job if they refuse to take a medical procedure. That's what we can do. That's kind of a long-winded response to your question. I hope I answered it to the best of my abilities.
Next one. Yes.
I've kind of been brokenhearted at the businesses that have closed everywhere in Idaho. As a governor, would you consider a statewide lockdown on businesses again?
Only if they're engaged in cooking meth or prostitution. That is so unconstitutional for businesses to have been shut down and restricted. And it will not ever happen under McGeachin administration. It's not okay to take those businesses' tax revenues, but then when we want to exert our power to shut them down, that's not right.
Okay.
Isn't it true a lot of the bills that were going to be passed regarding the mandates, a lot of the legislatures have been purchased by lobbying groups and a lot of the Chamber of Commerce, and these resulted in these things getting put in the drawer? And I also know, as far as a constitutional convention, there's a huge lobby group that's owning a lot of legislators. So my question to you is, I understand you're against the swamp, but how do we stop these legislators from being purchased?
Well, thanks. Okay, the question is, how do we prevent the lawmakers from being so unduly influenced by the special interests? Well, it starts at the top. And we don't have to create an office of corruption and anti-corruption and cronyism. You just have to not be corrupt and don't be a crony. Don't have those people on your staff and on your payroll. The example is set at the top, and they're just, I mean, the governor does have the veto power. So if there's a special interest bill that works its way through that's just wrong, in violation of our Constitution and our laws, like some of these educational things that they're trying to put into our classrooms, it'll get vetoed.
But what happens if it gets always shoved into a drawer?
Well, again, that's the question, what if it continues to get stuffed into a drawer? That's a fair question. Now, I will admit, I am not going to be, as your governor, I will not be able to solve all the problems. We need new leadership in our state. We need a new attorney general, one that will stand firm. We need a new superintendent of education who recognizes the threat. We need a new secretary of state who will commit to an election integrity. We need new legislative leadership, and the only way we get new legislative leadership is by getting new members in the legislature. So maybe some of you, wink, wink, are thinking about that, mulling that over in your minds. So we need new leadership across the board in our state. That's how we do it.
Hi, big fan. I recently, earlier this year, moved here from Colorado because it seems that insanity is a malignant disease these days and it's spreading. So I had a question for you. In your speech, which I appreciate, and I appreciate the fact you have to give these speeches, so you have to make them somewhat vague, but you mentioned the term special interest, I like out 32 times. You say the word they many, many times, and you say that they're super rats and we know where they live, we know who they are. Part of what Donald Trump's enduring appeal was is that he wasn't afraid to name names. So who are these people? And you know who they are.
Well, remember, I do have a big election coming up, and I have actually had friends. Representative Lenore Barrett, a solid conservative from Custer County, was taken out by these special interest groups. So please take that into consideration about as far as naming names.
Sure. Well,
but I know who they are.
Good, because I think we all appreciate knowing that you're willing to accept the fight now and not solely once.
Oh, this is a good story. When the 3 hospitals in Treasure Valley announced on the same day that there was going to be this vaccination mandate, I dialed up the governor. Governor, I need to speak to you. I go into his office. I asked him to his face, Governor, what's driving this? Do you have any idea what's driving this? I actually already knew because a citizen had sent me the proposed Biden rule. Again, it's all about money. These healthcare facilities will be paid a higher rate of reimbursement through Medicare and Medicaid, the higher proportion of vaccinated people. That's a Biden proposed rule. I knew that. I was testing the governor, testing him, his knowledge. But he looked at me, he's like, I don't know what's driving it. I go, well, Governor, I'm sure you could talk to the biggest you know, the lobbyist for the Idaho Hospital Association. I'm sure you have him on speed dial. Why don't you give him a call and ask him what's driving it? He's, I'll do that. I'll have to get back to you. I walked out of the governor's office that day, and that swamp creature was standing in the middle of the rotunda, just waiting for me to leave and for him to go into the governor's office. And he had just put out a statement criticizing my call to bring the legislature back into session and deal with this, saying that we are vehemently opposed to the lieutenant governor's call to the legislature to come back into special session. So what I do, I walk right up to him and I shook my finger in his face. I said, Alex, I don't appreciate what you said publicly about me, because I have not ever come out yet to say what my solution is. I'm asking to sit down at the table. I actually wrote a letter to all 3 of the hospital CEOs, with Dr. Cole, by the way, asking, will you come sit down at the table and let's try to solve these problems? And they all said no. But anyways, I shook my finger in his face and I said, Alex, I don't appreciate what you said about me. It's a lie. It's not the truth. I want you to retract your statement. He said, well, that's just not the way we see it. We disagree with you. So, speaking of special interests and Dr. Ryan Cole, he is being investigated by the Idaho Board of Medicine. These people are appointed by the governor. And there's one person, the complaint was filed by the Idaho Medical Association, so the Board of Medicine has to investigate it. There's a board member that serves on the Idaho Medical Association that is also a board member of the Idaho Board of Medicine. That is corruption. That is the fox guarding the hen house. That will never happen in a McGeachin administration.
I believe that the public education system at the national level is unconstitutional. You mentioned about eliminating or reducing taxes from the federal government. So what's your plan, or do you have a plan to abolish, help get rid of the Federal Department of Education and have Idaho dollars fund the public education system? And how would we do that without increasing property taxes, which is already a huge burden on people? I got my property tax notice, it's about $1,000 more this year. It's insane. I don't have any children in the public education system. And if you own rental property, you don't get the homeowner's exemption. So my question is, what do you think about abolishing the National Department of Education, and how would we fund schools on an Idaho state level basis?
The gentleman's question was, what would I do as governor to abolish the U.S. Department of Education and then work to lower our property tax? My honest response to that is, I'm not running for Congress, so I have no authority over the U.S. Department of Education. However, as I mentioned, being the governor and setting the tone and setting the budgets, those agency budgets, we don't have to take that money from the U.S. Department of Education. Now, there may be some statutes that need to be addressed. There's a lot of fluff in government. I learned that when I was looking at efficiencies in government. One of the things we discovered was a division of volunteerism within state government. Why do we need to tell people to volunteer? We could get rid of that. So there's a lot that we can do to clean house through the executive branch of government, but there are probably some statutes that we would also need to take a look at to change those statutes, because a lot of those programs that are put in place are statutory programs. So we need to work with the legislature, the policy-making body, to eliminate those programs, and then we can eliminate the funding for that. But your question, I do not discount your question at all. This is a real problem this is one of the most important egregious things happening in Idaho because so many people are moving in. What we can do is, what can the state do to reduce the mandates that the state puts on the local levels of government? Unfunded mandates from the state of Idaho that cities and the counties have to provide. We could also establish some true choice in education, perhaps allow the dollar to follow the child, and that would go a long ways to help make our schools more accountable to the parents and to the citizens. But no matter what we do, we have to deal with those local budgets. We're not going to see any real property tax relief unless we deal with the local budgets. And that's when you go down to your city council, you go talk to your mayor, you go talk to your council members, you talk to your county commissioners, and you find out how much of your money they're spending and what are they spending it on. The state can put constraints on the growth of those budgets. One thought I had in dealing with things right now, because everything's coming at us so fast and so hard, is pass a law that says everything is frozen for a year or two, so that nobody's tax increases goes up anymore until we find, work to find real solutions to this challenge that so many Idahoans are facing.
Can I follow up?
Quickly.
If there's a huge budget surplus, like I've been told there is, why are we all paying more in property tax if there's such I thought I heard there's like $1 billion surplus. Why are we paying so much more in property tax if there's such a huge surplus?
They're different pots of money, and the surplus that we're experiencing now is money that comes into the state general funds from income tax and corporate and sales tax. We have a huge surplus because we've basically been overtaxed for the last year or two. So, but those are different pots of money that don't necessarily have anything to do with local property tax. I did serve in the House 1 year. This was, I don't know, for those of you who've been here, it was called the Rish Property Tax Relief Bill, where they removed one portion of the local school. It's called the Maintenance and Operation Levy, and they replaced that with state general fund dollars, with the thinking that that would alleviate the burden of local property tax. You know what all that did was it just left a big gap that these localities then quickly filled that gap back up. So, like I said, until we really deal with those budgets, we're not going to ever really be able to have true, meaningful property tax relief for our citizens.
Rick.
So, when the legislature met supposedly to take up the COVID issues here a couple of weeks ago, my understanding that the chairman of the health, I believe his name is Wood, or if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So he made a really, I think, nasty, rude remark to the people of this state when he said, if they don't take a shot, he didn't really, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, he really didn't care that they could just go find a job somewhere else. And how do we get rid of people like him? The Speaker of the House, who, I was at a Q&A here a while back, and he was asked a question about taking money from Pfizer. And he has 4 different times. How do we get these people out and get rid of them so that we can just drain the swamp? I mean, voting them out, I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, I understand that part, but can we get them out?
Well, that's
they
what...
are so entrenched with the lobbyists and the people that are filling their pockets that they have the money to fight anybody that tries to run against them.
Yeah, well, again, that's a disgusting elitist attitude from people that have been there too long.
Amen.
And that's why I'm a big proponent of term limits. You go, you serve your time, and then you go back to the private sector.
Ma'am.
Why, in
and lobbyists allowed from the federal level, allowed to come to the state and get hold financially of our legislators. We have that much influence. It happens in education, in business. It happens in healthcare. It happens in, why are they allowed to come in there?
Money.
I mean, they pay their way in, but is that the call of the governor to allow that?
It's the money that's coming from the federal government to the states, but also the money, the way that our own state general fund dollars are being appropriated. And all of these policies are being driven by money. They're greedy, they're powerful, they're too greedy, and they're evil. They're driving the wrong policies in our state, and it just needs to stop.
Can't they make the law say no more?
We can certainly pass laws to restrict the power of the lobbyists. There is an organization, Idaho Freedom Foundation, that has a number of proposed bills to deal with that, to restrict the influence of the special interests. And one of them is that you can't, I mean, if you've served in a political position, you can't become a lobbyist within, you have to wait 4 or 5 years to become a lobbyist. You also can't be appointed to be a director of an agency. Yeah, there's a cooling down period. Those are things that we can pass in our state. We just haven't because of the people who are in those positions to pass those laws. The Senate, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this because I am the president of the Senate. I preside over the Senate while they're in session, and I'm supposed to represent the Senate. That's why I've gotten into trouble with them, because I've spoken out, I've spoken my mind, and sometimes they don't like that. But the leader of the Senate a month or so ago called the Idaho Freedom Foundation the greatest threat to democracy in our state. They're really afraid of these policies because they're going to lose their power.
Okay. Sheree, okay. She's waving her hat at me, Janice.
Okay, so thank you. I have a question about education. I have several children in the education system right now, and you had mentioned how their tests are performing always average. And I would like to know, I have my reasons why I think they're performing so average in these tests, but what can you as a governor really do to influence the educational classroom of our local school districts, not school districts, but school, like Satellite High School. My kids go there. It's like, okay, well, what kind of, you can have the best teacher, the best curriculum, but if those kids don't have the desire to learn, you're not going to have good test results, and if test results are the most important thing, I don't see how you're going to change that as a governor level if the children themselves aren't pushed by, I don't know, their parents or the community. I'm not really sure where it's going to come from, because there's definitely an economic issue that comes with children learning, and that economic issues continue to grow, and the disparity, and so the education is not getting absorbed into the children because of that economic issue. How can you as a governor, what can you do to help with all those problems the schools are facing?
The question is, what can the government do to not only improve the scores of our school children, but also incentivize the learning, the desire of learning in their young minds? It's a combination. The government is not the solution to all of the problems, but we do need to get rid of Common Core that's in our state, because Common Core is a dumbing down. It's teaching down to the lower common denominator. We need to get rid of that and not be afraid to talk about exceptionalism. That's what America being a great nation is, and we shouldn't be ashamed to say that America is an exceptional nation. For some people, that's a bad word. We can't talk that way because we're going to offend somebody. But the same thing applies within the classroom. We need to foster that and make them want to aspire to exceptionalism in their studies. So we eliminate Common Core, we take a look at, and there are things that I can do as governor within the administrative rules. We identified some of those things when we had the task force that we were looking at these things. We identified sections of the administrative rule that if they're not really attached to a statute, the governor has the authority to go in and remove those things. So we identified a number of those things that can be removed. But at the end of the day, it's not the government doesn't solve all of those problems, and we do need to get our parents more engaged, and we do need to do things more to support our parents. Instead of shutting them down when they show up at the school board, we need to put them on those curriculum committees, and that's another thing we learned in my task force.
Dennis.
You mentioned here a couple of times tonight the importance of terms limitations. We have a real problem in Idaho because according to the Constitution, the only source for constitutional amendment is the legislature itself. We cannot, as a people, by referendum, amend the Constitution of the state of Idaho. We have a technical, legal problem there. Do you see any kind of a solution to amend? Because what happened in 2002 or 2001, I don't remember, there was a referendum, and by election, by vote, Idaho citizens restricted term limitations. I think 2 or something like that, depending on the office. And then in 2008, the legislature turned around and repealed the statute. So they effectively taken the power away from the people. We're the sovereign. We're the sovereign. We're the source of the power, and our legislature has stripped us of our ability. Well, it's written in the Constitution is the problem. It's part of the Idaho Constitution that the only source of the amending the Constitution and to impose a terms limitation has effectively been stripped from us. Do you see any avenue for changing that?
Well, the question is, what constitutional remedies to address this whole situation of people that have been in service for too long? There's always a constitutional option. It's just a very high bar, but it's that way for a reason, because that is the ultimate law, highest level of law in our state. And so we don't want to just willy-nilly change our Constitution like we willy-nilly change the laws. So it's a high bar, but it is possible. It's been amended multiple times over and over again. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, we the people have modified our Constitution twice that I know of. One was the time when we put it into the Constitution, giving the legislature the authority and the ability to have the final say on all administrative rules that agencies put through. And thank you for doing that, because that's how we maintain control over our agencies. And then secondly, the last time we did it was to change the number of districts or senators within the districts. Now that's a real problem. As our population continues to grow in Idaho and more people are moving to the big cities like Boise and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, we're going to continue to lose more and more of our rural part of Idaho, which makes Idaho so special. So there is an idea, a thought that's floating around out there. It would require a change of our Constitution. It's similar to how our representation at the federal level works, where every state, regardless of the size of the population, has 2 senators. And so it would work similar to that, that every county would have at least one senator, and then the House would be made up of the population of the district. That would require a constitutional amendment. It is possible, but it is a high bar. But you're right. They tried, the people by initiative, I think they did that twice to put term limits into place, and then they just came along and overturned the vote of the people, which I would never have done as a state representative, and that's why I term limited myself.
My wife and I are political refugees from Las Vegas. We moved here a little over a year ago. We, growing up in Nevada, I noticed, I saw rhino after rhino after rhino get elected while we were taking in California refugees, record numbers, just like you guys are, just like we are here now in Idaho, right? And so I really appreciated your statement earlier about how things have to stop now. Because we let it go in Nevada, we let it go, we let it go, we let it go. We kept electing people we thought were Republicans, and now we have this clown named Sisolak who is running the country like his buddy Newsom over there in California, running the state. So I appreciate what you said about that. My question, though, goes to, you mentioned earlier how you are the president of the Senate, right? Mm-hmm. So a couple of weeks ago, at this very meeting, we were informed by a group of people that went to see that Senate operate a couple of weeks ago in Boise, and it didn't go very well. Okay? The report came back that they literally, basically did nothing. So I'm curious on how you went about handling that and or allowed it to happen, and if you had any say in the matter when it was going down.
Thank you for that question. The question is, what did I do or try to do to prevent the waste of over 100,000 of your taxpayer dollars for them to go over there and do nothing for 3 days? It was a complete waste of time. What I did, again, going back to all of last year and then time and time again this year, asking the legislature to reconvene. When the Speaker of the House finally announced that he was going to call the House back into special session, I drafted a letter to my colleagues in leadership in the state. A letter to the governor, a letter to the Speaker of the House, a letter to the pro tem. And I said, leaders, you're coming back in a couple of weeks. What can we do? I'm reaching out to you. Can we all put our political differences aside, and can we all meet together to try to brainstorm on ideas of how to come back and solve this issue for the people of Idaho? I said, I'll meet you halfway. I live in Idaho Falls, you're in Boise, I'll meet in Twin Falls. The governor responded back to my letter, and he said, basically didn't answer my question. He just laid out all the wonderful deregulation and all the great things that have happened under his administration. That was his response to my request, my respectful request. The Senate window, and I can send you a copy of all these letters if you're interested. He outright told me, he said, it's likely that there will be no bills that come through the Senate this year, so why bother to meet? And then the Speaker of the House didn't even give me the courtesy of the Lieutenant Governor to answer my letter. So I have made effort time after time again in the last 2 years to try to communicate and work with the other members of my party. And I understand, I hear your frustration that just because people have a big fat R behind their name does not mean that we are a truly conservative state. I would say that already we're a purple state, and we are one election away of becoming a blue state. And I have fought against that. My party, you may not be a part of the Republican Party, but my party is deeply divided right now. The last 2 times they selected their state party chair, lost the conservative, what I would call the conservative candidate, Raul Labrador, was won a few years back. He won by 1 or 2 votes. And then the last time my party met, and I was supporting my local Central Committee person, Mark Fuller, to run against Tom Luna, again, it was I think Tom Luna won by 1 vote. So my party is deeply divided, and my party has too many people that have been there for too long, they're too used to their power and their control, and that's the most important thing to them over the principle. And we have finally gotten past, through my party, a statement that says we pledge fealty to our platform. It took years to get that passed through, but it finally, because of the people, the grassroots people, getting elected on those precinct levels and going to the state convention and voting on these things, we finally got these things put into place, that if you're gonna run for a Republican, as a Republican, then you pledge your fealty to the principles that are outlined in the Idaho Republican Party. And if you do not agree with every single one of those platforms, and that's okay if you don't, explain why. And then all of that is presented to the voters. So it's all an effort of trying to provide transparency so that you, the voter, know who you're really voting for, and not just because the person has a big fat R behind their name.
For the last year and a half, I watched what's going on in the nation, mostly back in Washington, D.C. My biggest question has been, when I see people like DeSantis, Noem, Abbott, stand up in their states, and I keep questioning, I holler at the television, I say, where is Little? You know, not only do I say that, but I say, where is Rish, where is Craple?
Yes.
When I see the I just hope that somewhere in the wings, obviously I like everything you've said, and I don't expect you to be a DeSantis or no. Well, I do expect you to be. And I guess my question is, will you not be afraid to have your face plastered all over the nation, such as they are? Because we need fighters, and then we do not have a fighter in Boise.
No.
Well, thank you for that question, sir. And I think that that's what God has been preparing me for in the last 2 years. My picture, my face was plastered all over, not just national media, but international media, when I had the courage to hold a Bible in one hand and a gun in another hand. And say, the Bible represents our First Amendment, our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion. The gun represents our Second Amendment, which protects our First Amendment. You got a problem with that? If you've got a problem, if anybody has a problem with that in this state or on the national level, then I'm not your gal. So God, I do believe, has been preparing me for this, having my face plastered, have a target on my back almost every single day. And I'm not backing down, and I will not back down as this campaign progresses and it gets worse and worse and nasty. I can promise you the cronies are going to come after me, the mainstream media. I had this wonderful when Trump did endorse me, I put a press release out there. Not one member of the mainstream media picked up on this. But then when Governor Little was at Mar-a-Lago at a convention and Trump recognized him temporarily, the whole media was all over that.
Okay. The gentleman in the back with the hat, you been trying to go?
Me?
Yes, you.
Okay. First of all, I think you ought to have your head examined for doing what you're doing. of my adult life, except for when the 22 years I was on a lot of all expense paid trips by the United States government to go to all kinds of cool places all over the world. And when it came back, it got done being in the service, it chose Idaho as a place to raise my family. That was over 20 years ago when we finally got to lay down the roots here. And I guess it's kind of a statement and a question. I need you to convince me to stay, because I'm ready to go right now. I'm ready to pick up and go. My daughter has been fought a battle with cancer for the past 5 years. So she's going to be good. Got one more checkup here. She's a nurse. She was getting ready, she's a single mother, and was getting ready to get tossed out as she worked through this whole thing. And, you know, we're not doing anything here. We just talked about a lot of that. We went to Boise, we didn't do anything. Okay? So, convince me to stay, because I'm ready to go. I own my home, I'll sell it tomorrow, I'll pack up, and I'm ready to go somewhere else. I need to be convinced.
Will you stay in Idaho, because we need you? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work to create more Liberty hospitals across Idaho, which is what they're doing up in North Idaho now. They're doing that, and I'm helping to facilitate some of that up there, and that's what we need. So when we create, again, back to these true competition in our healthcare system, your wife will have a home where she's not ridiculed and discriminated against, and will have true competition. She'll be working in a place that she loves, that the administration there respects her professionalism, her autonomy, and her patients and their loved ones are able to come and see them while they're in your wife's care. So please stay, because we're going to need you as we move forward and we show the rest of the nation how we do this and how we solve these problems.
That's good.
Thank you for answering the question on top of the board. That was one of the questions I had. Having a couple of personal friends that are superintendents, I understand the education of kids, or lack of education of kids. So thank you for that answer. The one question I want to ask is, the media has attacked you on several fronts. I know they have an agenda they want to build. One of the attacks I know you've seen is your support for what they say, the lack of support for law enforcement in the state of Idaho. Would you care to respond?
Well, I have always, thank you. The question is, what has been my show of support for law enforcement? I always support our local law enforcement. I would never advocate for defunding the police, and some of the things that I am seeing, even in our own state, is so flat out wrong. I'm so grateful for the service of our men and women in law enforcement. Their job is to enforce the laws that the policymakers make. They may not always like those laws, but that's what their job is. And we need to support that. If we don't agree with the law, we need to go in and change the law. In our community, in our businesses, we have consistently supported the local policeman's ball. Every year we sponsor a table and support our local law enforcement that way. And even in Boise, they have another, it's called a Back the Blue event. And the last 2 years that I've served as the lieutenant governor, I have been asked to present prayer or pledge and speak in support. Every time I get a chance and I see them at our Capitol, I thank them for their service.
Okay, so my question is about your public land stance. I don't disagree with you that the state can manage the lands better, but my main concern is the state selling those lands. I can buy a section of land, I would, can, so all my hunting and fishing and outdoor activities are done on our public land. I don't want to lose those. I want those lands to be preserved for my kids, my grandkids, because they can be tapped. Those resources can be tapped and managed correctly.
So the question is, how do we keep access to the public lands and make sure we as Idahoans that love to fish, love to hunt, love to ski, hike, boat, all those things, what do we do to protect and keep those lands open? Well, I would never advocate for selling off any of those lands. And we need to keep them in some sort of a public trust. In fact, that is how, according to our Constitution, we're supposed to be getting the best return on those lands. It's just that we're not getting the best return on the lands like we could be. And some of the things I've seen that are outright wrong, again, driven in part by special interests, is when they negotiate these land swaps with some of the big companies, and they swap land here for land over there just because it's more favorable to the corporation. And I don't, that's not right. That's not good. We need to be looking at other ways to gain more revenue off those lands, but keep them protected and accessible by our citizens.
Matt, you right there. No, get behind. Trying to be fair here, you know.
I think a lot of us in this room can remember the visual of the Speaker of the House tearing up the State of the Union address by a very firebrand of a president. And President Trump has the ability to endorse lightning rods, and that's what we need in this country. I guess my question for you is, how do you work within the swamp? Because, I mean, already you've seen so much venom and so much critique thrown your way. And even when the governor stonewalls you and the Speaker of the House refuses to meet with you, how do you negotiate with North Korea, basically? Talk about your negotiating skills, because as much as we would all love to just throw a match and walk away from the swamp, we still have a system that is very swampy. And how do you build bridges with people that really just want to resist everything that you stand for right now?
That's a great question. How do I, as governor, how will I deal with the swamp and negotiate with them? Well, one of the first things I'm going to do as your governor is I'm going to restore confidence with the members of the legislature. I will never issue rude and condescending remarks towards our legislative body, which have been made by this governor in the past year and a half. I respect the legislative body. Our government has a constitutional balance of power between executive, legislative, and judicial. So I will show the legislative. In fact, when the governor vetoed one of those bills that worked to constrain his power, I did get a call from one of the members of Senate leadership, and he was just like, I don't know, I don't get it. He's like just gone off. He's gone off. I don't understand why he did this. And so these were things that even Senate leadership were kind of caught off guard. That's no way, the way to do that, to answer your question, is the same way that I live my life within my family and my businesses. And it's all about having good communication with people, being open, honest, transparent, and having where people can sit around the table and hash things out, and people will be at my table that aren't always yes women people. I want to hear from people that I'm not necessarily always going to agree with. That's really important to develop policy for the people of Idaho. It's important for me to hear from a broad perspective of people, but always stand firm that, okay, if this is your idea, could we even get there without violating a constitutional principle or one of our statutes? And if not, then we just always say no. But the same way that I operated all of last year, I was the only constitutional officer who kept my door open during COVID at the Capitol. It'll always be that way. I will always have open door policy. My colleagues in the legislature will be much better respected than what we're seeing in the current administration. And just being willing to sit down and be honest and transparent is the best way I can think of to answer your question.
Your turn.
Okay, I'm going to be transparent. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about it because I don't follow mainstream media, but recently it's come to my attention about Senator Risch and wanting to bridge the dams. Where are you standing on that? And do we have to live in fear of becoming a left coast state that protects the fish and strands their citizens?
It was, and forgive me, I'm not meaning to correct. It was Congressman Simpson who made that proposal. He is up for re-election this next year. And that position that he has taken is so unpopular with the people of Idaho. I'm strongly against that. And again, it's just another one of those elitist attitudes. What somebody who just thinks I can just throw $1 billion here and $1 billion there and they'll figure it out somehow. That's literally what he said and did, is that I'll appropriate a whole bunch of money to deal with this. No, that's not how it works. You solve the problem first of energy, loss of energy. How are we going to do that? How are we going to replace that form of energy? How are we going to deal with the farmers that can no longer irrigate their lands? You solve those problems first, and then you talk about undoing something. It's a terrible elitist attitude to just think that you can throw money at the problem and that it's going to go away. And there's no solution to that. I'm very much opposed to that. You do. We all have a chance to vote next year to have a proper representation in our state on that issue.
Thanks for coming tonight. Say, I just wanted to ask you, when you're the governor and you are balancing your budget, will our taxpayers' money go to any abortion clinics, any PBS, social media, garbage like that we as Idahoans don't support? Why would our money need to go to those types of things and the arts?
Your tax dollars will never go to pay for abortions in Idaho. I am solidly pro-life. I believe that life begins at the moment of conception. And if the lawmakers bring a bill to my desk that outlaws abortion in Idaho, I will sign it into law. The other questions that you have about PBS and what was the other, arts. So again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the things that are within the agencies that are not statutory, yes, we'll go through with a fine-tooth comb. We'll do zero-based budgeting. We'll look at the base of the budget instead of like they do every year. Just look at what's at the top, what they get last year, and how much more are we going to give them. We're going to do zero-based budgeting, where we go to the bottom and we look at the program. And if we don't need that program anymore, we're going to defund it. If it's funded by a statute, then I'm going to work with my colleagues in the legislature to undo the statutory requirements for that program. And that's how we undo some of that funding.
How do you feel about Idaho joining the Convention of the States?
That's a great question. The question is, how do I feel about Idaho joining the Convention of States? That's a very important issue to a lot of people. I will say that as conservatives are kind of divided on that issue. But I think we need to have open minds about it. Really depends on what the issue of hand is. Some of the language that I've seen drafted, and during my term, one of those bills never did come before me for a vote. But so I have seen some of the language. It does need to be, it depends on what is being proposed in the language of the proposal, whether it's term limits or balanced budget. Both of those things I support 100%. And then there's another idea that I heard recently having to do with perhaps the ability of the agencies to have too much power within the government. I think there's a lot of legitimacy in that consideration. So I have an open mind about that, but I will recognize and acknowledge that as conservatives there's a split in thought there, but I think that we need to carefully consider anything that comes before and what we can do as states to help lead out in solving these problems.
The guy behind Debbie, yeah.
Hi.
You're first. I'm trying to keep track of who's first and all that. So.
Hi, my name is Ken Warren, and we lived here since 2015. Before anybody shoots me, let me finish. We are transplants from California. We got sick of it, got tired of it, we was totally fed up with it, and within a very short amount of time, went from being, stuck there to let's look for somewhere else, and we picked Idaho. Came to Idaho, loved the atmosphere, loved the politics and everything that went on at that time, and since then I've gotten, as you said, become very disgusted with it. I want to go back. There's two parts to this part. This is what I'm going to say here, so just bear with me for a second. They say there's no term limits. There is term limits. It's called voting. Okay?
Yes.
Everybody in this room is educated to the point, and you want to know what she's going to say and where we're going to go, and we want to do something about it. But I can tell you from having 3 kids and 4 grandkids, we've got a couple, 3 grandkids who are, I will use the term, politically dumb. Dumb can be fixed, stupid can't, but dumb can. And their philosophy on government, politics, all that's going on is so warped from their education in California that 2 daughters in particular we just can't talk to. My wife just said, if they come over, we're just not discussing it. They still live in California. So now a lot of these influx of people are coming from California, and the younger group, and at my age, anybody who's 50 or younger, I consider younger, but I've seen in our neighborhood these younger 30, 40-year-olds come in with their Biden signs, they're posting all their signs, they're doing all this kind of stuff. What are you going to do to address the millennials and the younger people who are warped in their thinking and have been by our education system to see the light and look at the new way?
Well, that is how California has been lost through the educational system. Do you know the governor of California, we have these, it's called advanced placement courses that in high school, our kids now can earn up to a 2-year degree by taking these advanced placement courses in our schools here in Idaho. The governor of California has outlawed that, saying students cannot do that at all until they're at least a senior of high school, because it might make all these other people look not so good. I mean, that's nonsense. And then the governor of Oregon, who has removed all graduation requirements. The thing we need to do is recognize that we're not doing our kids any favor when we try to mollycoddle them and make it easy for them to go to school, because life is not always that easy. And we, as parents, we have to put our kids through some tough learning experiences in life, just like my mom and dad did with me. And we have to make them experience consequences of behavior and action, and help hold our kids accountable. And when we do that because we love them, and we show them how much confidence we have in them. So it's actually doing our kids a great disservice when we continue to try to mollycoddle them and make life so easy for them that they don't have to have any requirements to graduate from school. But that's why California is lost. It's why we're fighting so hard to prevent that from happening in our school system. One of the members that served on my Education Task Force Committee, she came from California. Same thing she told me, that her daughter was brought up in the school, and her heart is broken because she got married and said, "Mom, you're too crazy, you're a conservative, you're not going to get an invitation to my wedding." It's heartbreaking, but it's been because it's being permitted in the schools, and we're committed to not let that happen in Idaho. I do believe that a lot of people in Idaho and in this country are praying for the salvation of our nation. And the people are starting to wake up and see some of these things, especially after last year with COVID, with the homeschooling, and parents were peering over the shoulders and seeing some of the stuff that was being taught. Here's an idea: let's put cameras in every classroom so that a parent, you're taking a break from work or you just want to see what's happening in your classroom, go see. Why not? As business owners, that's what we do. We're used to transparency. We're used to being audited. We audit our books, we audit our inventory, we audit our payroll taxes. So why shouldn't it work that way in our government and in our classrooms? When we do things like that and have transparency, there are some examples of things in Idaho schools, not every school district, where BLM flags are displayed in the classroom and the pride flags, Obama pictures. It's the same thing. I don't think a Trump picture should be, I don't think a Trump bumper sticker should be displayed in the classroom. All those personal beliefs should be left outside of the classroom.
Yes. No. Sorry, the guy behind you, tell him that up first.
Dr. Finney, what I'd like you to explain to us or to me, what happened with when Governor Little was at the Texas border and you took some actions. I'd like to know why you did what you did and explain it. So maybe, I'm afraid it's going to hurt you from the way I've heard it. So I'd like
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Explain my action the second time the governor left the state and related to the vaccination mandate. Again, the first time the governor left the state and I came in and I issued an executive order that said no government entity, whether it's a school district, a public health district, a city, a county, or a state, may have a mask mandate. That's what the executive order said. He wasn't happy about that when he came back. He quickly undid it. And then he was not very cooperative to let me know when he was leaving the state after that. But again, I did it because, well, the lawmakers had tried to address that very issue, and the bills went through the House and died in the Senate. And we had been doing rallies all over the state. There were mask burning rallies all over the state, and asking respectfully to address this and continue denial of the voice of the people. And so that's what I did. Some people have criticized me, saying she has never done anything in her capacity as the lieutenant governor to stand up against this. Well, by our Constitution, I have two duties. One is to preside over the Senate, and I do cast a tie-breaking vote when needed. And then second, I act as governor when he's out of the state. And so the first time I had the opportunity to exercise my authority, because the legislative body had made an effort and failed, and our kids all over the state were being forced to be masked up, that's what I did. I issued an executive order to prohibit the government agency from having a mask mandate. The second time I did it was when the governor went down to Texas, was dealing with the border situation down there, and same thing, only this time it was the vaccination mandate. The governor himself had issued an executive order saying that no government agency or a person that came in to receive a service at a government agency could force a a vaccination passport or have to show proof of vaccination to go into the facility. What happened after that was Boise State University, when they started playing their football games, the president of Boise State University took that and said, well, that's what the governor said, but we're going to also we're going to say you don't have to show a passport, a card of being vaccinated, if you can show a negative COVID test. And I'm like, that is not what the governor's executive order said. So I fixed it. I fixed his own executive order to say, not only could the agency not do that, but they could also not, I plugged that loophole where it said you also do not force the agency to, or the person to provide a negative COVID test. I did expand it a little bit to also wrap in K through 12 schools, because I view those as government agencies and they had been left out of the governor's, that executive order. So it was an attempt to fix his executive order that had a hole in it, was being abused by Boise State University. And he was quick to undo that one. He actually did it he did it unlawfully. He unlawfully undid my executive order as acting governor because he did it while he was still out of the state. It's unlawful. As elected officials, we pledge an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Idaho and our Constitution, even when it gets uncomfortable.
Hey, first, I want to thank you for your stamina and your bravery of continuing to take questions and not knowing what anybody's going to say. So I appreciate that. I want to apologize in advance. I was in a District 93 school board committee meeting, so I got here a little late, so you may have answered this question. I would have worked for the INL for 38 years this January. I was forced into early retirement because of the vaccine mandate from BEA. John Wagner, the laboratory president, even went ahead of the executive order date, and I think a lot of it has to do with getting in line with the program office at DOE, because they're somewhat anti-nuclear, and trying to make sure they are very ahead of it, I think is how they looked at it. My religious exemption was denied. My rebuttal to their denial was denied, and my third rebuttal was denied. So I was forced in early retirement almost for 38 years. So this sounds self-serving, but there are so many other people in my same position that have the same concern and question, is what's our representative in legislation going to do in regards to this vaccine mandate and in regards to those people that have already lost their jobs?
Well, thank you for that question, sir, about what are we going to do. And again, I think I did address that question earlier, where we do need a law that prohibits that, because absent a law, we have nothing to stand on when it comes to the federal government trying to impose its will on us. But that doesn't mean necessarily that we have to force additional regulations on businesses. It just means that we as individuals have a right. We have a right to determine what goes into our own bodies, and that shall be protected, and that people shall not lose their job if they choose not to have a jab. So that's my solution. That's what we need to do.
What can we do to help? What would you suggest we do to help with that?
When we go back to session the first week of January, I will be restarting up the Capital Clarity sessions. Every Thursday at noon, I started hosting these with Representative Moon, and we're going to continue doing that. It was a great opportunity for citizens to come to the Capitol. If you can't be there physically, then we live stream it through Facebook and through the Idaho Public Television monitoring. So I encourage you, we will talk up, we'll put those on first up, having opportunity for citizens to come forward and have your voice be heard on those issues. They keep saying, they said that in the last special session, that we just don't have enough time to deal with this. That's baloney. They had plenty of time to deal with it. Lots of us have offered our help. But we'll make that a priority first and foremost again come January. And I would encourage you to continue to stay engaged and put that pressure on, just like last year when they finally came back in the special session, and the people, the citizens, were coming into the Capitol, people that had never set foot in the Capitol before. And I watched these citizens testify in front of the committees, and I was so impressed. I was so proud of the citizen of Idaho that came forward. Sometimes they were nervous, sometimes they didn't know how to speak properly to the committee, and sometimes they got in trouble for that. That's why we started doing Capital Clarity, because I wanted to give people tools and help them know how to help navigate the system and have your voice be heard. So do that.
What date is that?
Well, the session starts up on January the 13th. Is it the 10th? Okay, January the 10th. I stand corrected. And I love these questions. I love them. We'll keep them coming.
Carolyn. Come on, give that hell in hand.
We've been watching, diligently watching some of these education bills that are coming up. There is one that is coming out. It's an ESA, it's an education savings account. And we are really thrilled that the money may actually follow the children. How can we're going to be taking a couple of buses from here and congregating on the Capitol steps on January 28th. We want to emulate what Virginia did. You know, there were some flips that were just amazing because of the parents. What can we do besides getting on the Capitol steps? And we want the sponsors of the bills to talk about their bills. We want parents, we want them to talk about what's been happening. Besides putting pressure on the legislators, and especially our governor, what else can we do?
I don't know what day that falls on, January 28th, but if it falls on a Thursday, we'll give you a forum at Capital Clarity where literally thousands of people can hear from you. Well, if you can work that out on a Thursday, we'll give you the forum. Yeah. That's how Dr. Ryan Cole got to be so well known, is because we let him speak at Capital Clarity, and he started speaking about the truth and things that people wanted to hear. Of course, some of the swamp creatures and the leadership didn't like that. They did not like Capital Clarity. Wanted me to shut it down, but nope, we didn't.
Well, these bills are just being introduced, and we're afraid that they're going to go into a drawer. And we just want to make sure that there's so many people.
Carol, I just need to ask on this one. I'm sorry, from my perception, it's a specific bill, and this here that I don't want to address a specific bill. This is to address some other things. You know, I think the key in my mind is what it really is, and it sort of goes along. And this, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sorry to interlude here. Is as people, we have to keep pressure on our legislators. That's what it is, in whatever fashion, whether we're going to the Capitol, whether we're visiting, whether we're calling them up, whether we're going and being in their face, whether we're voting on them, whether we're challenging them in the primaries and all of this. That's what we get to do, okay? That's what we have to do. And there's no magic pill. I can just say that from what I've seen, there's no magic pill, no magic procedure to be able to accomplish what we want to be able to accomplish, other than to be persistent at it. And those people that are representing us truly represent us. They're not our leaders, they're our representatives. Okay, and so and I think that's just to how do we fix how does anybody fix this legislature today, the one that's going to be in session, going to be very hard in my opinion. Okay, extremely hard because of the individuals that are there. But you know what? There's a set of primaries coming up that will change them out. And that is the key there to be able to make a lot of this happen. It's unfortunate right now we have to deal with what we have, and we do have a lot of legislators that are in there that are trying, but there are some that are not. And so pay attention to those who are not, or who play like they are but are not, and then replace them. That's what has to happen. Okay? Okay. I'm sorry, but we need to just...
We'll give you a voice at Capital Clarity, right. And my Education Task Force Committee will help you because we voted unanimously on supporting an education savings account. So we'll help you out. It's all about public awareness.
Darnell, and then Kurt, and then I'll come back into here.
Okay. And I don't know how many know that this lobby in Boise is a $1 billion lobby. Billions, billions. There are people that are owned, absolutely. Personally, I think to call term limits is a cop-out. It's a weak excuse. We're here because we care. What are you going to do when you go home? Don't grab the remote and watch television. Right. There's work to do. There's work to do. And this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to get off our butts and we're going to talk to our neighbors. And they shut the door. They don't want to hear it anymore. Well, they're going to deal with what's coming because it's coming and it's going to be on everybody's doorstep. The vaccines, the mandates are a precursor.
Okay? Do you have a question?
We're talking about a convention of states. Let's talk about nullification. We have the power of nullification. How do you feel about nullification? Getting to my question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the question is, how do I feel about nullification? As a freshman lawmaker, working with other conservatives, we were all into nullification because those were the years when some of these things were starting to come into our state. But the thing I want you all to understand about federal laws, remember, we are a sovereign state. And this decision has already gone to the Supreme Court, where it has been ruled that states may not be compelled to enforce federal laws. It's already a decision in the Supreme Court. So all we have to do is simply act like the sovereign states that we are and say, no, federal government, go home, get off our backyard. You want to enforce a law, that's your job, it's not our job. Unfortunately, the way they get away with doing it so often within the states and goes to the question of a constitutional convention is because the states, that's how the federal government coerces the states to enforce their laws. It's through the carrot that it's the federal teat that gets dangled in front of our eyes, and they take that money, and that's how it gets enforced in our state. But if we act like the sovereign states that we are, it's not even a problem.
I'm Kurt Papke. I just wanted to talk about election integrity. Idaho generally gets fairly good marks for running free and fair elections, but we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of mail-in ballots. So I'd like to know what you would like to do as governor to ensure free and fair elections, and do you support audits of elections if there's questions?
Thank you for that question. The question is, do I support free elections and election in integrity, and what am I going to do about that? Thank you, because I've already done something about that. I have joined the effort for calling, I do support forensic audit, even here in Idaho. And I have joined the Arizona Senator Wendy Rogers in calling for a 50-state forensic audit, including Idaho. And she has endorsed my campaign. Because I think we need to learn the lesson that we saw happen last year, again, under the tyrannical rule of our current governor, who went in and changed election law. This is the job of, in our Constitution, this is the job of the legislature to determine our election laws. And by declaring martial law and going in and changing this law and that law and providing for mail-in ballots only, that's how we saw what happened last year in the presidential election. And we need to make sure that that doesn't ever happen again. And I will never act in that kind of a reckless regard to change the laws and interfere and disrupt with the legislative body. I do support the forensic audit. I have an example of a ballot that's a tamper-proof ballot that has within it 20 watermarks, that there's absolutely no way that there can be a fraudulent ballot. In the state of Arizona, one county, Maricopa County, they found 40,000 fraudulent ballots. They recounted, and then they say, well, there's no change in the vote. Well, when you're counting fraudulent ballots, that's not the problem. You're counting fraudulent ballots. You need to, when you can prove those ballots are fraudulent and they don't have any one of those watermarks in them, what do you do with it? You throw it away. And so I have a question for all of you tonight, because I will be working with my colleagues in the legislature and with our whoever becomes our next Secretary of State, and you get to hear from a great candidate tomorrow night. Would you be willing, there is a cost to these ballots, an additional cost of $2 million to have these tamper-proof ballots. Would it be worth you, in the $900 million surplus that we have in Idaho, would it be worth it to you to spend $2 million of your taxpayer dollars for those tamper-proof ballots? Okay, Representative Hanks, you are my witness that the whole room full supports spending the taxpayer dollars on that. But what some people may also not know is that some of that Mark Zuckerberg money was filtered into Idaho elections last year. So even as good as our election laws are, it's already starting to seep in, and we thankfully the lawmakers passed a bill to prohibit that kind of outside money from private sector in our elections. Thank you.
Red hat.
First, thank you for being here and giving us of your time. It's very important that we become informed as to who would govern over us. For too long, we've not paid close enough attention, and that's how we got to where we are. For a long time, we've thought of the swamp. It seems now we're finding out that there are many swamps, and the creatures might well be known as Hydra, as in Greek mythology. And unfortunately, it seems that what the federal government likes to refer to as grants, their standard operating procedure is to pull us along with bribery. Now, as long as we as the state are succumbing to those bribes, our sovereignty is impinged upon and we become little less than serfs. I'm wondering what and how you will be able to help the state separate itself from this illegitimate bribery that's been going on for a very long time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think I attempted to answer that when I talked about the governor she will be setting the mark when I go to submit those agency budgets and when I see those things. I'm going to give you just one small example of what happened in a Medicaid bill last year, where the federal government comes along and says, oh, states, your Medicaid caseload is growing so much and these costs are more than you thought they were going to be, and you don't have the revenues coming in. We're going to give you a little bit of a higher match rate in order to plug that hole in your Medicaid budget. Sounds great, right? But the problem with that was that if you agreed to take that money, that higher match rate in the Medicaid program, the rule said states you could no longer manage your Medicaid population. That if there was one person who all of a sudden became ineligible for Medicaid, you could not take them off the Medicaid program. So that's what I'm talking about how we're ceding our authority and our sovereignty to the federal government. Why should we not be able to manage our Medicaid programs to make sure that those in our community who need it the most are going to have it, and not these people that aren't even eligible for the program? That's just one example of what we saw happening last year, and I hope it happens over and over again. That's how we've gotten to this place where we're 45% now dependent on the federal government.
Debbie.
Yeah, thank you. Having foolproof paper ballots is all well and good. However, the moment those ballots start getting scanned in, I mean, if you go back to the old days when I was growing up, you had people at every county level hand counting, and when they got them tallied up, they'd pick up the phone, call the Secretary of State, and usually by midnight, you knew who had got elected. No, but when those ballots get scanned in, how on earth is the state or the counties going to validate that the machines doing the scanning aren't being tampered with? If, by golly, if they're hooked to the internet, if they're transmitting data, I know there's ways to do it, but I'm looking for the assurance from the counties in particular that that type of fraud cannot happen. The paper ballots are great, however, there's all kinds of points of failure there. So how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? And by the way, to date, there's no governor that has authorized an audit of the 2020 election. And time's ticking by. If there's ever going to be an audit, we're going to be a day late and a dollar short.
That's why I want to be your governor.
But I'm even worried by then it's going to be too late, because the legal system is going to play out before anything ever comes out.
But it's not too late for future elections, and that's what we need to do. We need to learn from these things and ensure the integrity of all future elections. So the question that you're asking about these machines is also a very legitimate, important question about those machines and what we need to do to make sure they're safe. To everybody that's leaving, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed this. Thanks for your time. The answer is we need a law to make sure that the correct machines are being used and that the correct safety procedures are being followed. Because I asked our current Secretary of State that very question. I said, how can I rely on the machines that are being used in each county that, these security issues aren't coming up? And he said, well, you don't need to worry about that because we're ensuring that within the agency, within the Office of the Secretary of State. And I said, oh, okay, so that's good. It's a managerial thing. It's a procedural thing. Yeah, and we're doing a good job. Well, good. Well, but what about what happens when somebody else becomes the Secretary of the State and that isn't the way they operate? That's why we need a statute. We need to strengthen our laws, and that's one of the areas where we do need to strengthen our laws so that it's no longer a managerial thing or a procedural thing. It's the law. That we're going to ensure every county has these machines that are verifiable and safety. We can count on the safety mechanism within those machines.
Okay.
Yes.
2 more questions. I'm sorry back there, but, Peg, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
as vinyl records have come back, so do paper ballots. I think it could be a pretty easy solution. I just want to comment on that. My question is, do you support the legalization of marijuana or the recreational use of marijuana?
So I do not support the legalization of marijuana. I do see some benefits of CBD oil being used for medicinal purposes. And it was part of the Farm Bill. If it's got only a certain percentage of the CBD oil in it, then I support that. But the THC, thank you for that. But I do not support the legalization of marijuana. So I especially when it's monetized, everybody uses this excuse, and I agree that prescription drugs can be much more dangerous. I don't know one person who's died from smoking a joint. I know many people that have died from overdose on prescription medications. I also know that alcohol can be a real problem and dangerous to the individual. But the monetization of marijuana is what leads to so many problems within these other states that have legalized it, because you're removing all of those arguments that people make about, using it for medicinal purpose and it's not so bad. But you monetize it, and then you just all of a sudden see so many problems with crime and problems with our youth. So no, I don't support that.
Under the Idaho Constitution, the governor has the authority to suppress invasions. We're being overrun by illegal aliens. I've heard that some accounts say that it's estimated 100,000 illegal aliens coming in the United States per month. Over a year, that's enough illegal aliens, as many residents as there are in Idaho. Would you be willing, along with other governors, to call up the state militia? You have that authority under the Constitution, along with other governors, because Joe Biden refuses to secure the border. He can't get enough illegal aliens into the country. Would you be willing to suppress invasions, and we are being overrun?
Yes.
I feel bad. See, that was a quick answer, so I'm going to give you a chance. Yes. Yes, because
Having known a lot of business owners in the area, forgive me if this is not a state thing, but I can't help but notice that they interview a lot of people who are on unemployment. They give the people the job, and the people can stay on unemployment and not take the job. Is that something that can be changed on a state level that you have control over? That if somebody goes and interviews for a job and they're offered that job, they should take the job, and if they don't, they should be taken off of unemployment?
That's a great question about unemployment law. And again, that's a transgression that our current governor had last year, because that's policy that the legislature needs to decide when the money was coming for this the federally enhanced unemployment rate, which if you were the amount from the state and the amount from the feds, it was equaling $15 an hour. And so if you're going to get paid $15 an hour for not working and staying home, where's the incentive there? When I served in the legislature under Obama, he tried to do that, to have this additional federal unemployment, and that vote came to the legislative body, and I voted against it. For those reasons, because we need to disincentivize people from not wanting to get back to work. Our governor was in Idaho Falls a few weeks back and boasted about our rate of unemployment here in Idaho, something like 3% unemployment rate. It's not entirely transparent with what's really happening in our community and within our businesses, because every business I talk to, it doesn't matter whether you're a print shop, a restaurant, a farmer, a university, everybody is struggling to find employees right now. So the real picture is there are 6 different measures of unemployment in Idaho. The highest level of unemployment that we have in Idaho now is close to 10%, 9.8% rate of unemployment, and that measure counts the people who are so-called discouraged and not looking for work anymore. So that is absolutely a state policy issue that, especially if we're not taking that enhanced federal unemployment rate anymore, we need to go in and fix those laws so that that's not even a measure anymore. Because the truth is, and people know it because they can feel it, right? You can feel it. We have 9.8% unemployment right now in Idaho. People need to get back to work. Businesses are suffering. I've loved this. Can we take one more question, or do you want to wrap up? Doug?
Do you want to do it? It's up to you.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, Jane, we're just going to do 1, 2, 3. Raise your hands up who wants. Jane, 2. Okay, you 4, that's it. Okay.
So, I have a question for you. Are you willing to take on the reform of Medicaid in Idaho? And the reason I'm asking you that question is that I go and I visit with small businesses, and when somebody's on Medicaid, they'll only be able to work X amount of hours. And then those workers, they get to that hour, and they go, I can't work with you anymore, because otherwise I'm going to lose my Medicaid. I think it's part of the problem, but I don't know exactly if you can help us with that, or how we can get around that, because that is something that people are addicted to right now.
Yeah, that's called Medicaid buy-in, and yes, I do support the concept of allowing, because Medicaid rules are pretty stringent and strict, saying if you are at this level of income or this many hours, you either qualify or you don't qualify anymore. And so when people hit that, then they don't want to, there's no incentive for them to continue working. So we do need to address that. It makes sense to me that we would work with those individuals, but we might need to put some time limits on that and say, you know, because we want to help people become fully integrated and fully contributing to the society as much as possible. Some individuals may not ever be able to be fully implemented, but if they're doing something to help offset their Medicaid costs, then I think there's merit in that.
Okay, I'm sorry, you probably already answered this, but I was working at the hospital, but I want to know what your, we'll say, top 3 biggest differences between you and Brad Little that you feel would improve upon our state.
Okay, where do I start? Let's see. Well, there's a big difference in our management style. I'm a person that likes to collaborate with people. As I said, get people around the table, and I'm not going to compromise my principle and my standard, but I am going to bring people around the table. Unlike our governor, that his unilateral decisions last year did not include, it wasn't just me that he excluded from the decision-making process. It was every other constitutional officer and legislative leadership. He had a select group of people that he formed an advisory committee, and those are the ones he listened to. That's problematic to me. That's not my style. Our success in business is because we get our top managers and engage them in that decision-making process. So that's a big difference between the governor and I, just the fact, I mean, I am definitely more of a conservative than he is. When he served in the Senate, when I was serving in the House, and a marked difference in vote between the two of us was the vote between marriage between a man and a woman, which the legislature finally passed through, but he voted against that. I support that, that marriage is between one man and one woman. And so fortunately, after a few efforts, it passed and came to you, the people, and voted to amend our Constitution. So I do have, I consider myself to be more of a conservative Republican, where he's probably widely thought of more as more of a moderate Republican. He has, after serving 20 years on that board of the biggest special interest group in the state, and when the president at the time made that very rude and obnoxious statement about a sitting senator, the lobbyist for that group is now his chief of staff. So there will be none of that in the McGeachin administration, none of that, those crony special interests. And I think I think that's best describes what I can think of, yeah. No, and being more bold, our governor tries to walk the line and, you know, doesn't want to offend this side or that side, and that's not where we're at anymore. And by being appointed to the Senate and then being appointed to the lieutenant governor's position and not really running a blood, sweat race, you know, like last year when he was running and his opponent was Paulette, not last year, but 3 years ago, his Democrat opponent was Paulette Jordan. And she would be up there on the stage and be throwing out all these kinds of challenges to him and kind of almost insults, and he would never fight back against that. I'm like, come on, man, just fight back, say something back, punch back, and he just never did. It's just not his style. I can't wait to debate the governor, and I will debate him.
Anybody else? Okay, right.
Thank you for coming. It's been an honor to just hear your responses and all that. I have a quick question. The LGBT community, that's how you say it, I don't know if that's correct, but what is your view on minority status for them, giving them the same status as minorities of race, and your view on transgender bathrooms?
Okay, that question, I do not believe in identity politics of any sort. I would prefer people to leave what happens behind their closed doors to themselves. I really don't want to know about that. And so I don't support identity politics of any sort. I don't support the idea of creating a special class for this or that, because then once you start doing that, where do you stop? We're all created equal, and we all have equal rights. And then in the bathrooms, we should not be forcing the young people, or even the grown-up adults. It's really problematic to mandate to businesses that they have to provide these accommodations. It should be the business, and it's not the role of the government to say that.
Joan?
Janice, thank you so much, honey. You mentioned this in your opening statement about how critical this election is. We all know that this is, we're fighting the powers of hell. I think everybody here recognizes that. And we do have 3 other people running on the Republican side, which I think is great. They're getting a lot of people in the state involved, and that's a good thing. But I think all of us are wondering what's going to happen in late March, April, May, when the election comes, and are we going to split the vote? We can't split the vote against Governor Little. This is a very important race. Where are you on what may happen then?
Thanks for that question. That's a really important question that we're all concerned about. And as I had mentioned earlier, based on numbers, my campaign is the campaign that can be successful beating Governor Little. however people want to consider or view a person being considered a front runner, I would say that in a state that supported President Donald Trump 70%, and it being a Republican primary, and my campaign, my candidacy being the one that has the Trump endorsement, the numbers show that this campaign is the only campaign that can be successful in the run against Governor Little. And I ask all of us as conservatives to recognize that and unite together so that we can be successful and not tear each other apart as conservatives on the way there. I'm asking you for your support.
Okay, one last question. For a couple of years now, the Speaker of the House has drawered things that he does not want to deal with. One important one is to lower taxes or adjust taxes. He does not, and for a number of years he's put it in the drawer because that's the agenda that he has. He doesn't want to lower taxes. How does he have the right to be that judge of all those that he puts in the drawer and doesn't let?
You mean like sales exemption on groceries, on food?
Lots of things.
We have a governor that's pledged, if that bill comes to my desk, I'll sign it. Well, why hasn't it come to his desk yet? You have to ask that question because the governor has a lot of influence on the lawmakers, and there are things that can happen where if it's the will of the legislative body to have that tax relief bill passed through, then that's the one that should be passed through. And why it's being held up in drawers is because somebody at the top must really not want that one to go through. And that's really such, for whatever reason, and maybe the representative could help me understand better why they're so opposed. It could be the special interest, it could be the grocery chains. I don't really know, I don't understand. I mean, that's been an important bill for many years now, and it's one that can be the most helpful to Idahoans who are now, we're suffering under rates of inflation. All of our food is more expensive, our gas is more expensive. Anything that we can do to lower that burden on our citizen, especially with food, is what we should be doing.
I think, well, some of us think part of it is because Representative Ron Nate has spearheaded that bill, that concept, and they play petty politics. You cannot get stuff through if they don't want you to. So I think that could be part of it.
That's a good point. Just like with this pledge signing thing that we had, and Representative Hanks signed, I have your signed form. She wasn't there last night, but I sent the invitation to every single Republican lawmaker, senator, and House member. We did have a total of 19 Republican lawmakers sign this, but how many total do we have? 90 at least Republicans. Every single one of those Republican lawmakers should have their name on signing that pledge. And it's really unfortunate. I hosted the event as the lieutenant governor, not as a candidate for governor, because I was trying to take that part out, the political part out, because some of them are like, no, we're not going to be there. We won't do it because she's doing it. There is a lot of that that's happening, and it's unfortunate because it's not what's best for the people of Idaho. And that needs to stop. Those partisan politics need to come to an end when we are talking and dealing with the important policies for the people of Idaho.
Okay, one more, you're lucky.
All right, one more. And
one last one, and that's it.
I just want some information because that deal on the grocery tax, we asked that question of the speaker, just a couple weeks ago when he was up in Rexburg. And what he said was that, well, you don't need to worry about it because you're getting a tax rebate or refund. And my wife and I, we didn't care about that because we're old people who have a lifetime to build wealth, right? I was more concerned about the young families that have little kids to feed and mortgages to pay and car payments to make. But his response was, well, you've got certain tax breaks that you can get that will make up for that. But we want to gouge all the tourists that come through Idaho. Is what this is really about. There's money there, and the government wants that money. And I suppose, you know, if you were involved in tourism, you probably don't like your customers being gouged because they're more likely to go to another state that doesn't do that. So that's essentially what Speaker Becky said was, you don't have to say the name on it, was that we want to be able to gouge all the people coming through our state on their way to Yellowstone for the tax. That's essentially what
It's an elitist and an out-of-touch response. Thank you so much for your attention tonight. I do ask for your support. Please go to janiceforidaho.com website, and there's materials. I've got bumper stickers. You can sign up for a newsletter, and we've got a great merchandise store online. So thanks. I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, you know, I do want to stress, and one thing that did come about, a lot of questions are, what can we do now? It's really hard for any candidate or anybody to do anything now, but there are some elections coming up, and pay attention to them. And that's the big thing. You have to, you know, you have to keep the pressure on your legislators now. And a lot of them need replaced. And so with that, again, we actually have, Janice is here tonight, and we have a couple others, candidates for governor coming over the next few weeks. You'll look at the calendar and you'll see them. The key thing there is we need to pay attention and really look at who we want to represent us. And listen to what they say, look into their background, and do they really represent your values, and can you trust them? And that's the key thing. Can you trust them? Because that's what we're doing. And with that, thank you everybody. Thank you, Janice, very, very much. I appreciate it.